Welcome back to Let's Unpack That. You know the drill. We talk, you laugh, we feel validated. I'm Nina.
I'm Lydia.
So, serious question for you, Lydia.
Yeah.
For my dad's birthday, should I get him golf balls with Donald Trump's face on them?
Here's the question. How good is he at golf?
I don't actually know. He goes a lot, so I would assume good. Now that the weather's getting better, he'll be going more. He actually went last weekend. Funny enough, actually, my boyfriend wants to go golfing with him. I don't know. I think I'm secretly dating an old man because he's like, your dad and I should go golfing together. I'm like, sorry, what? Just kidding. I'm really interested by him. But no, serious question. Should I or should I not?
I mean, yes, it will be satisfying to set up a tee and just smack the hell out of Donald Trump's face on a golf ball.
Oh, so satisfying.
But another question is how many of those balls will end up in holes versus how many will end up in a lake where they rightfully belong?
I don't know. I really couldn't tell you. I found one other gift, but so I essentially, into Google, I typed in gifts for golfers and personalized golf balls came up, but they were like all cute with like people's like kids on them and all of that. And I'm like, fuck no, I'm gonna like
No, what you should do is get them with your brother's face on them.
My brother's face?
Yeah.
Why?
Because you're the favorite child, obviously.
Oh god, I wouldn't go that far.
I would.
But it would be pretty funny. They come in a set of 12.
I mean, why not?
Well, because I also found this like little net thing that he can practice golfing into.
Okay. Like in your backyard?
Yeah, I don't know.
Gifts for dads are always so hard.
Honestly, I have an easier time picking out gifts for my dad than I do my mom. Because my dad has lots of hobbies. I just have to pick one. And usually he has stuff in the Amazon shopping cart that he keeps on looking at and saving for later. So I'll just buy it.
See, last time I looked at my dad's Amazon shopping cart, he had over 1,000 items in it.
Oh, my.
Just like saving them to look at later. Not like a wish list is a thing that you can use.
It is.
And he had to delete those 1,000 items before he could put the hard drive that I'm getting into his cart. So.
Oh, Mr. David. I almost blanked on your dad's name, and I hope I got it right, but I'm just like, I did. Thank God. I was like, if I get her dad's name wrong, I will be so ashamed of myself.
I mean, I don't know if I know your dad's first name. I know what his first name on Facebook is, but I don't know if that's his actual name.
It's not.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Also, I think your mom has like an alter ego on Facebook.
She might. I know. I mean, that's my dad's alter ego. And my mom, I think, just accidentally has 2 Facebook accounts because she locked herself out of her original one. And instead of unlocking it, she just made a whole new one.
All right.
Yeah, boomers.
All right. So, oh, man. Today we're talking about chapters 15 and 16 of The Hunger Games.
Can I be off topic one more minute?
Yes.
It's really weird to be recording now. For those of you listening at home, it's about 1:30 my time on a Saturday afternoon. Instead of wine, I'm drinking coffee. It's odd. I'm not devastatingly tired as I normally am. I'm somewhat almost alive.
Yeah, it's light outside. It was raining. It might be still raining on and off here. I just had a luxurious morning, made myself pancakes and drank my coffee, which means I'll definitely have to pee halfway through this podcast, but that's fine. But yes, it's a Saturday morning. The house is quiet. And I have to go to work in 2 hours.
And I'm getting on a plane in 48 hours and hoping I don't get sick.
Why?
Coronavirus.
It'll be fine.
Chill, it's fine. I just compulsively touch my face all day, every day, so we'll see.
Yeah, same. It's been hard. I'm touching my face right now. I should stop.
It's okay. People our age have a high survival rating. We'll be fine.
Yes, we'll be fine. Other people won't. And that's not cool, but...
Did you see that meme that said, patiently waiting for coronavirus to kill off the boomers so I can buy a house with a view for $2?
Oh my God.
And it was on Facebook labeled under insensitive content. It had that little like click to view insensitive
Oh my
content.
gosh.
And I was like, no, this is the content.
I mean, considering that most of Facebook's consistent users are boomers, I definitely say it's insensitive content for them.
Also, I would like to note it's not funny about people dying. We just deal with absurd and bad things with humor.
Yeah.
So don't sit there
Yeah.
and be like, but the coronavirus. Yes, I know. I get it. I'm well aware. We're
Yeah,
just
people are
funny.
dying. It's not cool. But also,
What else are you going to do?
we want to buy a house someday, and if this is how we get it, then this is how we get it.
This is how it happens.
Yeah, so that's going on.
Speaking of people dying, Hunger Games time.
Oh, wow. Excellent.
Thank you. I'm getting better at these all the time. So we're starting out with chapter 15. Katniss just dropped the Tracker Jacker nest on top of the career pack, killing 2 of them. And at the end of the last chapter, she was hallucinating and eventually collapses from the venom in her system because she was stung a couple of times. And that is where we left off. So, chapter 15 starts with Katniss having a Tracker Jacker nightmare, or several nightmares, where she relives every horrible event of her life and imagines all the people she loves dying. She wakes up still in a ditch where she passed out, and she wonders what happened to the rest of the careers and Peeta after she ran. She realizes that Peeta saved her life by telling her to run. Later, she cleans up in a stream, walks along it until she realizes that Rue is following her. They create an alliance, and Rue uses leaves to draw out the poison from Katniss' stings, and Katniss gives Rue some of the burn ointment for her burned arm. They eat dinner together, and Rue talks a little bit about life back in District 11. They share a sleeping bag up in a tree as the anthem plays. Katniss learns that she was out for 2 days, and Peeta is still alive and no longer with the careers. The careers have a camp by the lake with all the goods from the cornucopia, and Rue and Katniss begin to hatch a plan to destroy the supplies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is an exciting chapter.
I
This
like
one
this
and the
chapter.
next one were really liked this. So Tracker Jackers.
Tracker Jackers. The one line stood out to me that said, this is the nature of the Tracker Jacker venom. It's so carefully created to target the place where fear lives in your brain. So I was going to ask you, Lids, what would you see if you were infected with Tracker Jacker venom and, reliving something horrific? Personally, for me, I would be back in the hospital after my mom had her double mastectomy because I was 18 and I had a very serious panic attack in the hospital after visiting her in her room. I had to step out and I was at the end of the hallway in like the little prayer cubby that they make up for you and just completely hyperventilating. Had to call my boyfriend at the time to come pick me up. And easily, when I go back and think about the times I've been most just panicked and afraid, it's definitely that one of those days. That's the first one that always comes to mind. That was horrific. That was just a horrible day. So, cheerfully enough, that would be what would infect me with Tracker Jacker venom. That would come up. How about you? Reveal your soul to me.
Oh, first of all, I don't want to reveal my soul to the internet. That's the thing. I don't know because like I've been through my fair share of shit, but also I have a very vivid imagination. So, like all the bad things that could potentially happen, like I've imagined them and I've cried about them. So it would probably be one of those things, like my whole family dying or something awful happening to all of my friends. And that because I've been in the emotional state of like feeling like it's really happening because my imagination is so vivid. I could definitely see that being a thing. And because of all the like very vivid nightmares that I've had,
Hey.
probably a bit more like trippy shit and supernatural stuff would be going on in there. Like I'm going to crowdsource solving a nightmare a little bit later. But first, I want to talk about what part of the brain is responsible for fear, because the Tracker Jackers target, as Katniss says, the part of your brain where fear lives. And we see this also later in the series when they condition Peeta to be afraid of Katniss so that he wants to kill her. And so I did a bit of research on the brain and what happens in the brain when we experience fear. And it turns out fear is a lot more complex of an emotion than we typically think. There are three main structures in the brain that are involved in fear: the hypothalamus, the amygdala, and the hippocampus. And of course, there are many more because the brain is incredibly complicated and everything is connected. But this is the basic process that scientists have figured out. And this is according to the Wikipedia page for fear.
Go Wikipedia.
Yes. By the way, the reason that we are comfortable using Wikipedia as a source is because it's so fact-checked by so many people. And just because you might not be able to use it as a source in your academic papers, we're doing this for fun. We're not submitting this as a thesis. And Wikipedia is a very good and generally reliable source for generic information. And if you're doing actual research, feel free to use Wikipedia as a jumping off point, even if you can't use it as a primary source.
I don't know what you're talking about, not using it for academic papers. You bet I would copy and paste those citations at the bottom of the article if I had nothing else left. So...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. You use it as a jumping off point. You go to those citations and you use those.
Yes.
But you don't quote the direct Wikipedia article and say, I got this from the Wikipedia page. Because a lot of professors don't allow that.
No.
But anyway,
In any case,
the Wikipedia article for fear says, the brain structures that are at the center of most neurobiological events associated with fear are the two amygdalae, located behind the pituitary gland, which is like basically in the right center of your brain, like one on each side. Each amygdala is a part of a circuitry of fear learning. They are essential for proper adaptation to stress and specific modulation of emotional learning memory. In the presence of a threatening stimulus, the amygdala generate the secretion of hormones that influence fear and aggression. Once a response to the stimulus in the form of fear or aggression commences, the amygdala may elicit the release of hormones into the body to put the person into a state of alertness, in which they are ready to move, run, fight, etc. This defensive response is generally referred to in psychology as the fight or flight response, regulated by the hypothalamus, part of the limbic system. Once the person is in safe mode, meaning that there are no longer any potential threats surrounding them, the amygdala will send this information to the medial prefrontal cortex, where it is stored for similar future situations, which is known as memory consolidation. So, I'm going to read another quote now, and I apologize because it's so long. After a situation which incites fear occurs, the amygdala and hippocampus record the event through synaptic plasticity. The stimulation to the hippocampus will cause the individual to remember many details surrounding the situation. Plasticity and memory formation in the amygdala are generated by activation of the neurons in the region. Experimental data support the notion that synaptic plasticity of the neurons leading to the lateral amygdala occurs with fear conditioning. In some cases, this forms permanent fear responses such as post-traumatic stress disorder or a phobia. MRI and fMRI scans have shown that the amygdala in individuals diagnosed with such disorders, including bipolar or panic disorder, are larger and wired for a higher level of fear. So basically, there are two parts to fear: the experience of fear and the memory of it. It's why some fears are lasting, like Katniss's fear of Prim dying and her memory of her father dying, and others are less permanent, like when you see a shadow in your room and then realize it's just a pile of clothes on a chair. The hippocampus deals in short-term and long-term memory so that you remember that something was or wasn't a threat and you will or won't be scared of it again next time. So here's where I'm going to crowdsource a nightmare, which has plagued me for years, so bear with me here. I once saw a picture of a sculpture, and that night I spent the entire night in a nightmare that it was pacing in front of me as I tried to sleep on a couch. The room was entirely light. I could see it clearly. It just scared the absolute shit out of me the entire night. So, if anybody listening to this knows of a sculpture that looks like a person covered in tar with only ice blue eyes showing, crouching like Spider-Man on a wall, please let me know, because I have not been able to find any proof that this sculpture exists, and it still scares the shit out of me, which is why I incorporated it into my novel, and it's still my worst nightmare. So thank you, and let's return to the Hunger Games now.
Oh man. No, I feel you.
No joke. I have searched frantically for this statue and for evidence that it actually exists. Cannot find it. Saw it once on Tumblr for 2 seconds. It gave me nightmares.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So, help!
Ah!
I hear clicking. What are you doing?
Oh, I found a great photo for my dad's golf balls. And I'll send it to you.
Okay.
On Skype.
Ew.
I mean, come on a golf ball?
Yeah. I mean, just the face?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Then definitely, yeah. Oh, that is the ugliest picture ever.
I know. On a golf ball, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Okay, so back to the Hunger Games. The Wikipedia article for Fear talked a bit about fear conditioning, which happens to Peeta later. But what is happening to him now? What is going on with Peeta?
You know, I think that is a question that many people have asked for many, many years, decade now. And I can safely say I have no fucking idea. What is his MO? What is going on? What are we doing? On one hand, it's like, okay, he's totally just backstabbing Katniss. He's running with the careers. Why? That is such a great way to get himself killed. But then on the other hand, he's still like, Katniss, run. And I don't know. Like, when does he fall in line from being a fellow tribute to being in love with her?
Yeah. And with him being in love with her, we learn in this chapter on page 206 that Rue thought that love was real.
Yeah.
That Peeta was in love with her and that she was in love with him. And when Katniss reveals that, no, it's all fake, it's all for the games, she was shocked.
Well, but how much of that could be due to the fact that she's really young?
Yeah, true. Because she is really young. And it's, oh man. She has, just thinking about Rue, like, we're going to discuss her in a lot of detail later.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that she is latched onto Katniss is so... I mean, just think about it. She is the oldest of 6 kids. She has had to take Tesserae for all of them and give them her food that they survive. And she's only 12. So she finally has a big sister who's taking care of her and who likes being around her and who makes her life easier. Like, that is... Ugh.
It all sucks.
Yeah.
It all just sucks. Peeta at this point, I don't even know what to think about him. I don't know what to think about Katniss thinking about him.
I don't know what to think about Katniss thinking about Cato, because she says, I mean, we talked a bit in a previous episode about how she's really buying into the games now. Mm-hmm. But she says on page 197, if Cato broke through the trees right now, I wouldn't flee, I'd shoot. I find I'm actually anticipating the moment with pleasure. Like, what?
Oh, it's totally, she's getting a taste for the thrill of the games. And it's a psychological thing of where the hunted becomes the hunter. I definitely think it's primal instinct and revenge. It's survival and combat mode. Because you don't know what you're going to do when it's a life or death situation. When you're fighting for your life, you know, you'll hear stories of victims that are like, I don't even know what happened. It just clicked in me that I had to fight for my life. And, you know, they'll recount being very strong or the adrenaline or just doing something to save their lives. And in that moment, you know, this is kind of what's happening to Katniss, especially because she has the return of her chosen weapon. You know, when Glimmer died, she was able to get the bow and quiver of arrows away from her and took them back. Now she's, you know, she's in it. She's back in the runnings as far as she's concerned. She now has a chance and she's ready for it. Going on this kind of survival and combat mode, I looked into the idea of hypervigilance and tried to find out what do we know about the heat of the moment psychology. Unsurprisingly, there's not a lot of research about it. Really, it makes me wonder how much funding is going into the mental side of war. My guess is pretty much little to none, because there's got to be psychological effects of being in open combat that are just totally, I mean, we speculate, we guesstimate, we have, you know, we know that it's bad, but really the scientific research behind it is, very little, including, you know, along the same lines of gun violence, very little of it. But I did go to pbs.org and looked at an article entitled Going to War, Combat Experience. So one of the big things that PBS was, pointing out the most is that when you're in combat, it's a lot of fear and exhilaration. And I think this is pretty much the constant state that Katniss is in right now, fear and exhilaration.
Mm-hmm.
And to quote the article directly, war is a lot of things and it is unrealistic to pretend that exciting isn't one of them. War offers soldiers a raw life, vibrant, terrifying, and full blast. According to Sebastian Junger, it is insanely inciting. It is the worst thing in the world, inflicting both physical and emotional injuries, yet the people who have been through it often miss it terribly. The exhilaration is related to the brain's psychological and physiological response to trauma and stress, centered in the amygdala, the fight, flight, or freeze part of the brain, triggering the adrenaline flow, pushing up the pulse and blood pressure levels dramatically, and flooding the heart, brain, and major organ muscle groups. There's nothing like it in the world, one Afghanistan veteran told the article writer. If it's negative 20 degrees outside, you're sweating. If it's 120, you're ice cold. If it's an adrenaline rush like you can't imagine. Article also goes on to say, fighting for survival in Vietnam, Carl Molantes often felt satisfaction when his unit killed the enemy. In later years, he felt haunted by those deaths, as do other combat veterans. Looking back to the origins of human warfare, it's clear that the conflict is deeply related to protection of home and kin, and not to killing for its own sake. Yet, however compelling the reason, killing is a difficult act with difficult consequences. Professor Dave Grossman tells us that killing can bring immediate survivor euphoria, which the happiness of the survivor at being alive is inseparable from the death of the other person.
Whoa.
So pretty much exactly what Katniss is going through. Kato is her enemy. She's looking for that satisfaction because she's protecting herself and her home. In this way, Katniss is very much a soldier fighting in this war. I also went on to Psychology Today and looked at an article titled Survival Mode and Evolutionary Mismatch. And again, directly quoting the article, human beings are designed biologically almost exclusively for the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. And while there have been some genetic changes in the human beings in the last 12,000 years, those changes appear to have been relatively superficial, affecting skin color and hair color, for example, or the ability to digest milk as an adult. But one of our key design principles as a human species is that we're built to be triggered into survival mode whenever our survival is perceived to be at a significant risk. We see this all the time. People with PTSD, just trauma in general, people are in situations of abusive relationships. It's survival mode, again quoting the article, however, isn't only an overt state of fear or primal terror of being torn apart by a jaguar or a grizzly bear. Whenever we feel any kind of pain or emotional distress, whether it's self-pity, for example, or guilt or shame, we're thrown operationally into a state of survival mode. Indeed, the biological reason that unpleasant emotions become triggered within us is the first place to alert us that our survival may be at risk and to motivate appropriate action to address that risk. When we have intense feelings of emotional pain during a breakup, for example, the feeling is telling us that the relationship that's very important to us may soon be lost, and the pain is biologically designed, in a broad sense, to motivate behavior that might help us preserve the relationship if we possibly can. We still have our innate survival mode instincts, even though those of us who are in more developed nations don't necessarily need them. But in this case, it's good for Katniss's case, because she can use that to her advantage in the woods and in the arena. It's taken her far with her hunting skills and being able to provide for her family, and now it's coming to light here again in the arena. It's the same setting in a way that she's experienced before on her different hunting adventures with Gale, except now, as Gale famously said, now the prey is human.
Mm-hmm.
This also plays a little bit into the alliance psychology. We talked a little bit about it, that it's interesting that the careers always make alliances. And so this is going back to the hunter-gatherer idea, why there are constantly alliances being formed. As hunter-gatherers, banding together was the only way to survive. With the conditions that these kids are in, they're going back to very basic survival instincts. And why, as much as we'd like to say that we don't need other people, we have to admit that we do. It's biologically something that we require.
Yeah, and even Katniss admits that she's been really lonely in the arena.
Yeah, really,
Which
really
shows,
lonely.
not only do we physically need other people to help us gather and hunt enough to survive, like we see the careers doing, and like we see Rue and Katniss doing together, where they each contribute something to their dinner. They also need a physical presence of another human being.
Yeah.
Just psychologically.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I guess it all comes back to survival and combining survival with war.
Yeah.
I think that was really interesting, the part about survivors' euphoria.
Yeah, isn't it? I mean, God, you feel good in that moment, but then you come home and you're like, oh my God, what have I
Yeah,
done?
like thank goodness in the moment that it was them, not me, but also the guilt that creeps in later on.
Or even maybe just not even thank God it wasn't me. Maybe it was I genuinely enjoyed that, you know?
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
once you have time to process it, being like, "Oh God, what did I do and why?"
That's why you'll find sociopaths who kill and kill and kill because they'll have that survivor's euphoria, but they don't have that sense to, they don't have the emotional structure to come back and be like, oh my God, what have I done? You know, they lack that.
Yeah.
I always have to throw in my serial killers.
Yep, you do.
Yep. But here's a question. Katniss was out for 2 days. What do you think the audience saw during that time that Katniss and presumably the other tributes, while they were down and hallucinating, what did the audience see? And I'm always wondering, what were the other tributes that were on the other side of the arena, like Thresh or Foxface, that clearly weren't affected by it? Did they just not try to track anybody down? I mean, how vulnerable was Katniss in this time? But also, what did the audience see?
I think Katniss missed something big that might have actually involved Thresh and Foxface, because when she wakes up, she hears a cannon go off pretty soon after, which can't have been nothing. So I'm thinking maybe some of the other tributes had to survive a similar, like, wall of fire, but something else. And that the game makers threw that at them because they knew, well, if you kill somebody while they're down, that's not fair.
Oh, I don't think they care about fair. I think it would be, it's not exciting.
Yeah, that's a better word. It's not entertaining if you kill someone while they're down. So they basically couldn't touch Katniss or the careers for several days and decided to play with other tributes in the meantime. That's what
Yeehaw.
I think happened.
You're probably right. Do you think the other contestants are worried about nudity? Because here it is, Katniss is out there bathing, but she still, I mean, she doesn't get fully undressed.
I think that's part of having to make the book itself PG-13. But also, like, the cameras have already seen their bare asses. Nobody gives a shit anymore. And if they do, then, like, it's only because they privately want that. Like, the cameras don't care. And they should know that the cameras don't care.
When did Katniss show her ass to the camera?
I mean, she didn't purposely show her ass to the camera, but she's peed and pooped in the woods.
That's true, but I'm sure
And that requires showing one's ass.
I would imagine that doesn't get onto the camera roll.
Yeah, so I mean, there might be a difference between using the facilities in the woods and bathing, which is a situation that the cameras would probably film, because as we've discussed before, there is a very pedophilic nature to these games where if a tribute is naked, you bet it's on camera.
Oh, yeah. Going back to Rue, I love that she finally has this older sister kind of person in her life, like you said, but I feel like she's incredibly gullible in this scene. I mean, Katniss could have easily killed her after Rue fixed her stings, and I just think she never had a chance in this game. Like, granted, she's obviously been following Katniss for a while, but really, what does she know about Katniss? What do we know about Katniss? This could have ended up really bad for her.
Yeah, it could have. And, well, this is the part of the show that we're going to talk really in depth about Rue and District 11 and the racism in Panem. So be prepared for that. But yeah, I think Rue is, I mean, she's 12. And when you're 12, you're a combination of very gullible and very aware of what's going on, more aware than adults give you credit for. So, on one hand, yes, Rue has watched Katniss since the training center, and so she hasn't chosen Katniss as her ally based on nothing. She probably knows that she reminds Katniss of Prim, and who knows, might be changing her acts a little bit to be more like Prim. But also, I think Rue knows that she doesn't have a chance. In her heart of hearts, she knows that a 12-year-old from District 11 isn't going to win, and that maybe by allying herself with the tribute who got an 11, maybe she could make her life and the end of her life of some use. And, I mean, take a risk. It's her last days. So I think Rue is smart and also gullible. And that's why, in the end, she doesn't make it. But she also knows that she's not going to make it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it does. It makes me sad.
Yeah, this is, I mean, the saddest death in the series. And I actually, the first time I read her death, I cried. I think I've mentioned this in the podcast before, but I left a little tear stain in the book.
Oh, I do remember you saying that now.
Yeah, so, I mean, we'll get to that next episode. But let's talk about District 11 a bit, because we learn the most about District 11 in this chapter and the next one. We learn as soon as Rue takes out the leaves to heal Katniss's stings that there are still tracker jacker nests in the orchards in District 11 that they work in. And they have to carry these leaves with them to alleviate those stings on the job. Number 2, they only get a decent lunch if they run into a flock of grooslings and they can hunt their own lunch. 3, Rue has never had a whole turkey leg to herself. She has always been hungry. 4, if you steal crops, they whip you in front of everyone. This is a very common occurrence, not surprising since the people are so hungry, and the mayor actively endorses it. 5, they get fed more during harvest so that they can work longer, and the kids have to leave school to help with the harvest. The kids actually climb highest in trees, making their jobs more dangerous. They use torchlight to work after dark. They don't have floodlights or any electric lights. They use torchlight. 7, the guards don't hesitate to kill a boy with a mental disability for taking dark vision glasses to play with. And 8, people sing as they work, and mockingjays carry their songs. So, with all this that we've learned about District 11, the similarities to a large plantation, astonishing. It's
Scarily.
Yeah, it's in the southeast of Panem, which, due to rising seas, would be what is now the Deep South. According to the Hunger Games wiki, as shown in Mockingjay Part 1, District 11 citizens are dressed in physical attire resembling that of the antebellum South.
Really?
Yeah. And we already talked about how it's not an accident that everybody cast in District 11 is black. So comparing District 11 to slavery and to the era immediately after slavery is not a far reach. And this is on purpose, I think. I mean, we've talked about the Appalachian quote-unquote white trash being District 12, allying with an enslaved South. Those are the 2 most impoverished and marginalized groups of people in the United States still today.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about it.
That alliance is powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's key to recognize here that oppression didn't end when slavery ended. We should all know this by now.
Yep.
So Panem might have regressed into slavery or near slavery, but honestly, we're not that much better today. And if we continue down the track that we're headed, I mean, we can learn from this dystopia how easily we could fall back into that. So thanks to the civil rights movements of the 60s, a lot of legal progress was made, but legal oppression still happens today. There are voter registration purges, which, according to a site dedicated to preventing voter registration purges, according to a recent analysis by the Brennan Center for Justice, at least 17 million people were purged from voting rolls nationwide between 2016 and 2018, with racial minorities hit hardest. There was a dramatic increase in such purges following the U.S. Supreme Court's 2013 Shelby County v. Holder ruling, which freed areas with history of voter discrimination from federal preclearance of election changes under the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So basically, some areas are getting exempted from the Voting Rights Act? Like what?
Hang on.
Excuse me?
That happens? Today? Really?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Fake news.
Plot to overthrow the government and overthrow the white people with minorities. Jeez.
Of course.
You might have heard that in our recent election, voter suppression is still a thing, and it affects people of color the most. For example, long lines at polling places that we saw this last Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
Some people waited in line for 5+ hours just to vote.
Yeah.
And people who can't afford to take that time off work, who are often impoverished and impoverished people of color, would not be able to vote in that situation. It's just people who can afford to take that time, to take 5 hours out of their day to stand in line to vote, who would be able to vote.
And you can always do a mail-in ballot, but if you don't have if you don't have a permanent address to send a ballot to, what are you going to do?
Right. And like if you're moving around,
I mailed my ballot in, but I mean, I've been fortunate enough to have the same permanent address for years. Some people aren't that lucky.
Yeah. And if you're having to change your address every month or two with the DMV, like that's a whole hassle because the lines at DMV are so long.
Yep.
And because people and administrations in areas where particularly the people of color vote more Democratic have closed DMVs and have closed centers for registration, and that would help people access voting. And so
what's that sound? Racism.
Yeah, not to mention the whole, if you have had a felony, you're automatically disenfranchised, and most people with felonies are people of color because our justice system is unfairly biased against them.
There was a gentleman in Alabama who was put to death here just a couple days ago. He was charged with accessory or, what's the other word? Accessory or like,
An accomplice?
Accomplice, that's the word. He was charged with accomplice to murder of 3 policemen. They were white. He was black. He's not the man that pulled the trigger, nor do they have any proof that he had anything prior knowledge of the murder. And many people have advocated for the fact that, hey, he didn't actually pull the trigger. We don't know for a fact that he knew anything about what was going on. There's never been any proof. Maybe we shouldn't put him to death. And just a couple days ago, Alabama, the governor, Ivy, whoever, said, nope, I'm not going to grant clemency to that. And he was executed just a few days ago. A black man.
The very next day, she signed a thing that abortion is not to be played with because life is holy.
Life is a gift from God. That was actually about a year ago when she signed that abortion bill. But everyone's bringing it back up now because she's just killed this man. Here's a really fun thing. Do you remember learning about the Birmingham church bombing?
Yes.
The 4 little girls that died. The man who committed that crime in 1963, he's still alive on death row. So they took this man who was not, he was probably guilty of some crime, but not worth capital punishment, and they executed him.
And they speeded up his execution.
They sped it up.
As opposed to somebody who has been
on death
for
row
something since the 60s.
Since the 60s for killing 4 little girls, and he is white, if that wasn't obvious.
Well, folks, if you needed any more proof that the government values white lives over black lives, there it is.
Hey, Alabama, you suck. You're very pretty. I drove through you once, briefly, for a couple hours, but you suck. Get a new governor.
So that's District 11. Cool. But also, what struck me about Rue's narrative is that she details how the peacekeepers killed a boy named Martin, who stole a pair of night vision goggles to play with. And she says that Martin had the mental age of a 3-year-old. He was intellectually disabled. And still, nowadays, police kill disabled individuals, especially black disabled individuals, at a higher rate than they kill neurotypical individuals. According to NBC, up to half of people killed by the police have a disability. And so Martin from District 11 is not unique in that way. He's just a continuation of the same trend, which is really unfortunate. Now, I was shocked to learn that the statistic is that high. The final thing that I want to talk about, which will lead us into chapter 16, in which I want to make another debate about Rue, is that I'll bet that the songs that District 11's people sing while they work are derivations of old spiritual and gospel songs that slaves would sing while they worked.
Yeah.
Let's get started with chapter 16. Alright, so the summary of chapter 16. Rue and Katniss make their plan to destroy the career supplies by the lake, so to make them go hungry, make them feel the pain. Rue talks a bit more about her family, how she's the oldest of 6 kids, and how she loves music. She hugs Katniss as they part ways to enact their plan. Katniss watches the careers from the forest. There's a pyramid of supplies a little ways off from their camp. The couriers still have tracker jacker stings visible from Katniss's hiding spot, which suggests that they didn't have the sense to take the stingers out. Katniss learns that Peeta is somewhere in the woods bleeding to death from a wound Cato gave him. The couriers leave to find the tribute who set the smoking fire, which was Rue because it's part of the plan to draw them away. And they leave the boy from District 3 on guard. Katniss watches as Foxface approaches the pyramid, does a little hopping dance to get to it, and steals some supplies. Katniss realizes that the ground around the pyramid is mined, and that the couriers have used the boy from District 3, which is the technology district, to reactivate the mines after the initial countdown to start the games. So Katniss takes 3 shots to open a burlap bag of apples and send them tumbling, setting off the mines and blowing her backwards with the force of the explosion.
Ooh.
Yeah, this was a great chapter.
I love this chapter. I just want to say, I love this chapter. I think it's interesting, despite her newfound power with the arrows, or let's say not even newfound, restored power with the arrows, Katniss still doesn't think that she or Rue can win the games. If you think about it, she probably has more experience with the actual act of killing than anybody else in that arena. Mm-hmm. But she doesn't think that she has a chance.
I mean, it's probably part of, if she believes that she doesn't have a chance, she won't be disappointed when she dies.
I don't know if she would have time to be disappointed, but yeah.
So, music.
So going back to kind of what you said about the songs that they sing being potentially old psalms or gospel songs, music is, as we learned, one of Rue's favorite things. Katniss doesn't see the point, but this touches on a really beautiful part of mankind. I went to the University of Central Florida website. There is a page that's titled Your Brain on Music. The website itself is super cool. You can click on different parts of the brain and see how music affects it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's the University of Central Florida's study on music and the brain. So kind of what we were talking about earlier with music and the parts of the brain and fear and everything, music also plays a big role in how your brain develops and what it does. For example, the frontal lobe, which is used in thinking, decision-making, and planning. The frontal lobe is the most important to being a human. We have a large frontal lobe compared to other animals, and by listening to music, we enhance its functions. So decision-making, planning, that sort of critical thinking is extremely enhanced by music, which is cool. So you can see how Rue has been, you could probably argue in a way that psychologically she's been very well developed to, stay up in the trees, plan to stay away, make those critical decisions. Another interesting thing is the cerebellum is what coordinates movement and stores physical memory. So by feeding that part of the brain with music, it enables muscle memory. So what do we know is probably requires a lot of muscle memory is probably Rue when she's so nimble and fast in new environments through the trees. She's been doing it for years, and the whole time she's been doing it, people have been singing. I would put money down saying part of that singing is also part of what makes her so good at moving from tree to tree, because it helps coordinate her movement and stores that memory. It's pretty fucking cool.
Yeah, that is really cool.
I know.
Another thing about Rue in this, just before she and Katniss part ways, when they're talking about music, she talks about the Mockingjays and how they imitate her song, and Katniss shows her Mockingjay pin. And then Rue shows her own token, which Katniss says looks like a star or a flower that she wears on a woven grass necklace. And here's my question to you. Is that a cross? Because if a lot of the symbology of the Old South has survived in Panem, could Christianity have also survived?
That's cool, because if you think about it, the Greek cross, the equal armed cross, doesn't really look like what the typical Latin cross looks like today, which is the most recognizable form of just the Christian symbol, is the cross with the longer standing leg. But the equal armed cross looks a little bit closer to like the Red Cross symbol. So it could have very well been mistaken as, if Katniss has never seen it before, she could have mistook it for a star or some kind of flower. Mm-hmm. I love that. I actually didn't pick up on it.
I only picked up on it this time because I was looking for the symbols of the South.
That's really great. I like that. It's probably possible that Christianity could have also survived.
Or at least the symbols involved in Christianity, like the songs and the hope that it embodied for a lot of African American people. and
The
that it still
sad thing
does.
is that religion has the potential to be so beautiful and powerful and comforting, which is what my religion is to me. I wouldn't necessarily call it textbook Christian, but religion has this ability to unite people and to bring comfort and hope to those who have none. And it's just small rant here. It's just disgusting how people in our country have taken that and mutated it and made it into something that it's not. It's sad, but in a beautiful way that the Christianity, the symbology of it, could have potentially survived in District 11. It's like taking it back down to the Jews in Egypt who were slaves and just holding on to faith that they would get through this. It takes us way back, early theology. I
Yeah.
like it.
I mean, that's why a lot of the old spirituals and gospel songs that the slaves used to sing were about Moses. It's why Harriet Tubman was called the Moses, is that whole let my people go and one day God will free us from this. Which is, I think, one of the reasons why District 11 was so receptive to a revolution, because they were just waiting for it. They were saying, okay, we're biding our time, but God will free us one day.
Yeah.
And if it's through this white girl with a bow and arrow, then here
The
we
second
go.
coming of Jesus. Yep.
I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say the second
No.
coming of Jesus. I would say,
I'm
like,
kidding.
the Moses of Pan Am.
Exactly.
Which also it brings in a little bit of complexity, like
Yeah.
white saviors, but also is Katniss actually white? She's described as having olive skin, but all of us perceive her as white because of the movies. How does that whole thing work?
And we could divulge into that in a whole new episode. But speaking of also diving into ancient texts and pulling references from them,
Oh my
Katniss
god.
says that she hallucinated Peeta as sparkling. Is that a Twilight dig? Suzanne Collins, were you meant to be part of our podcast? I think so.
Oh my gosh. I noticed that also. I underlined it. I was like, Edward?
Edward? Peeta? Edward? No, he's
I mean,
sparkling.
Stephanie Meyer does have a blurb on the back of this book. So I think it's safe to assume, like, they were in the same genre, they were in the same time, they were not enemies.
Oh no, and I think Twilight definitely came out first.
Oh yeah, but I would love to have Suzanne Collins on this podcast just so that she could explain everything.
Explain yourself, madam.
Like answer my complex questions that
Are
aren't
you
answered in the text.
digging at our Sir Edward,
Is District 11 Christian?
Mr. Perfect of Perfect Land?
Is PETA a metaphor for Edward? Is PETA a vampire?
Or is Peeta much better, therefore is Peeta Jacob? Gasp.
Okay, in this case, I think that PETA would be Edward because he's sparkling and he's been clean.
Trying to
His
save
whole
her.
life, he's from a higher class, and whereas Gale, I think, would be Jacob because he's from a lower class. He's more rugged. He's been in the woods with her. He spends a lot of his time in the woods, and he has a
Wow.
big family. And that connection would be like more so. All love triangles are the same.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was just poking fun at Collins, poking fun at Twilight, but all right. I think we should do a bonus episode on the prequel.
I think we should too. When does it come out again? May?
Hang on.
That seems like so long from now. I want to say it's May 20th.
It is May 19th.
Okay, I was one day off.
Yeah.
Thing is though, if we do a prequel episode on that, it will have to be spoiler free.
I completely disagree. I think we should tear it
No.
apart. We just have to say, hey, this is not spoiler free, so listen to this after you've read the damn thing.
Okay, maybe. I guess,
We need to talk about this.
I mean, there's going to be a lot of things that we learn that are new
I'm ready.
in the prequel, so I mean, it would be pretty hard to do a spoiler-free episode.
It would be.
I'm thinking for the sake of our immediate engagement, most people are not going to read the prequel the week it comes out.
I would disagree.
As it is, there's going to be like 6 months
It'll be a
worth
little
of
bit delayed.
holds on it at the library.
It's fine. All right, so rounding up this chapter, the careers have booby-trapped their campsite, and now it's time to really play this game.
So Katniss sits for like half an hour in the bushes.
Trying to figure this out. Yeah.
Just watching for anything that might give a clue. And it's Foxface who helps her figure it out.
Go Foxface.
The one that she forgot that morning when they were counting up who might still be alive. And Foxface has been stealing from the careers.
She's a badass.
Yeah. So she's the one who's figured out the route to get to the center of the pyramid and how to, like, avoid the mines.
Neat. And now...
And then it all blows up.
Yeah! Well, since you have to go to work and I have to pee, I think we can call it there. But thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this. If you have any other comments you'd like to add, go ahead and hit us up. We now have an email.
Yeah.
Lydia. And what is that email?
It is doitforthevamps@gmail.com.
We did it.
Yeah.
Email us, tweet us, write us a letter, maybe. Talk to us in person if you would like. And follow us on Twitter. And we are also on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. And someday the world. CNN. I saw the most hilarious headline this morning as I woke up. I pulled out my phone, looked at the news. Trump campaign is suing CNN. I wonder who is going to win that one. Could it be the multi-billion-dollar news industry or the failed millionaire? Who knows? Time will tell.
Or CNN will tell if it wins.
That's true.
Get it? Because Time is also a news site.
Hey, I hate you.
Oh, that's okay.
It's okay.
So thanks for listening. Special thanks again to our audio producer, Dylan Forehand. As we mentioned, you can follow us on Twitter at Let's Unpack Pod and email us at doitforthevamps@gmail.com. A ridiculous email, I know, but we couldn't get anything related to the podcast name because everybody took it.
You fuckers.
And hopefully we will see you in 2 weeks, but
if I don't die of the coronavirus, yeah.
Yeah, Nina will be in Maryland for the next 2 weeks, so our recording schedule would be a little screwy at that time. So depending how tired you are, the weekend you come back, we will or will not have a next episode in 2 weeks. Otherwise, in 4 weeks. So, in the meantime, get ready for the prequel. It's coming up pretty soon.
I almost said, stay sexy and don't get murdered. Thank you, my favorite murder.
Let's get this bread.
Let's get this bread. Bye-bye.